Arriving in Ireland on Thursday evening, after a transatlantic flight followed by a 3-hour car ride, I was quick to fall asleep. The next morning, in an effort to fight off jet lag and because I love keeping a schedule, my alarm went off at 7:55 a.m. so that I could wake up, shower, have breakfast, and then another hour and a half car ride to a gorgeous cliffside Buddhist monastery and retreat center for a movement and meditation yoga class. After the class, I continued to the town of Glengriff to pick up my registration for the Tour de Beara bike ride, a 120K, that's 73-mile bike ride, through the Beara Peninsula of Western Ireland, a place that is so rugged and hilly that it makes Pittsburgh look like Indiana. Walking into the Eccles Hotel to pick up my registration, bib, and hopefully find some vendors, I noticed something else that was happening in the hotel. Pushed to the side and creating an unusual backdrop for the cyclists who were gathered there were bird cages and candles, painted carts and floral arrangements. There were lanterns on poles with ribbons, wreaths primarily in pastel colors, and a large sign congratulating the couple-to-be, whose wedding was at that same hotel the day after the bike event. To be honest, having just celebrated a wedding in Port Huron, Michigan the week before and being no stranger to pastel decorations and hotels, the reality of that wedding barely caught my attention. It only really came to mind during my flight back to America the following Wednesday, when I was considering the trip as a whole. See, my last night in Ireland, I was at a restaurant called the Preacher's Pub. I mean, how could I not, right? There, I could barely hear my waitress because of the crowd gathered at the bar. When I asked the waitress if she knew what brought the lively and boisterous crowd to the pub that evening, she said that that day was the funeral of a well-known and much-loved local politician. She said that these were attendees of that service coming to remember their friend with joy, celebration, and more than a few drinks. I thought it odd that a wedding and a funeral bookended my time in Ireland. Weddings are interesting. Like the birth of a child, many people point to that day or those days as being the greatest day of their life. But if that is true, and that is the greatest day of your life, what does it say about the rest of your days? Does it mean that the remainder of your days are a slow downhill roll to an inevitable and sad end? What does that say about the birth of a grandchild? Is it therefore less than your wedding or your child just because it's not one of those two best days? Now, obviously, this all seems like hyperbole to me, like superlatives of celebration. My parents took me to Disney for my 6th birthday. My mother loves to tell the story about me on May 20th, 1988, the day before my birthday, in our hotel room, when, after a day spent around the joys and magic of Disney, I went up to my mom and said, "Mom, today was the best day of my life." I enjoy telling the story of the next day, May 21st, 1988, my birthday, when upon arriving at the Steamboat Willie for brunch, my father told the maitre d' that it was my birthday. I was stood on a table in front of the restaurant, and the patrons there went along with singing me happy birthday. Then, in front of everybody, I was asked, "Who is your favorite Disney character?" as the characters were walking around the restaurant. I responded with all the joy in my 6-year-old body, "Donald Duck." The maitre d' looked around, his forehead creased, his smile faded, and he announced, "I'm sorry, he's on vacation today." Then all the other patrons began to laugh. I guess life does go downhill after we make such a claim of greatness about one day. Tucked among the Shehay Mountains of County Cork in southwest Ireland, there's a historic site called the Guggenbeara. The name translates to the rock clef of Beara, that's B-A-R-R-A, which comes from the name of Saint Finbarr, F-I-N-B-A-R-R. St. Finbarr is the saint of County Cork, and as legend has it, traveled through those mountains to the idyllic island in the 6th century, stopping at this very site to establish a monastery and hermitage. Next to a picturesque 19th century chapel that sits on an island only slightly bigger than the building are the remains of a heritage that can be dated back to 1700, a place for pilgrims seeking solace and respite. The hermitage is open air, and no bigger than the sanctuary here at Faith Lutheran. 11 cells are dug into the side of a hill resembling a horseshoe. No doors or mats or hallways, just a shared open space in the middle, with a tall wooden cross of about 10 feet, and a plain stone altar where the Mass was celebrated. I wonder, for the brothers who slept in those earthen shells, what the best day of their lives were. As they sat on the green grass in the shadows of mountains beneath the blue skies of heaven, worshiping, praying, and contemplating the faith that provided for all their needs and the community found among one another, before retiring to their hand-dug cells carved into the earth, what day were they most thankful for? I wonder if it was the first day that they arrived at Guggenberra, finally getting there, arriving to the rest of their lives, communing in the place where St. Finbarr had. I wonder if it was the day that they finally finished digging their cells into the shared hillside that they called home. I wonder if for some, it was the day that the chapel was completed some 2 centuries later. Maybe for some it was the day that they joined the monastery, marrying themselves to Christ, a wedding of sorts. I wonder if some of those monks might consider the greatest day of their lives as being the day that they were baptized, that day when they were claimed by water and the word to be children of God. Though remember that our baptism has 2 parts, the day that we are claimed on earth and the day that we continue into those promises made as we are claimed by heaven into the merciful hands of God, our Maker and our Redeemer. It is an upward path set from our here to God's there. I suspect, however, monks being monks, that they would say that the greatest day of their lives was still to come, because that would be their last day here, the day that they finally got to go to their heavenly home. A dear friend of mine refers to the anniversary of her friends and loved ones' deaths as their heavenly birthdays. I've always liked how that sounds. The day we are born into heaven, coming into the second act of the promises made in the waters of baptism. I like to think that that would be the monk's answer, that the best day of their lives would be the last one, a wonderful final opportunity to give thanks for all the days that a life can hold, a last chance to say thank you to God for this gift of life. I love the hopefulness found in the truth that the best is yet to come, a promise that Jesus has made us, that as we share a death like his, we too will share in a resurrection like his. The promise of God's forever and ever, Amen, is an upward path, one set from our here to God's there, where everything keeps getting better. Thanks be to God.